Hello and welcome to another Thriller Fiction Thursday with me, the author Michael Campling, in which we're reading Lawful Duty, the first Devonshire Crime Thriller. There's a I think the fifth heat wave in the UK here today, so it's very hot and stuffy in this room, and I'm shut the window to try and keep the outside noise at bay. So I will do my best, and I will crack on with it. But before I do, thank you very much for being here. If you've stumbled on this episode and you think, where's episode number 1? If you go to michaelcampling.com, you should be able to find episode 1 there. Or anywhere in your podcast, if you're listening, just up for Thriller Fiction Thursday with Michael Campling, you should be able to figure out episode 1. So, Lawful Duty, a Devonshire crime thriller read by the author Michael Campling. Chapter 12. In the Riverside Cafe, Barry Lehman smiled at the waitress as she brought him his tea and began unloading her tray onto his table. "Thank you, but I don't need the milk. I drink it black." "Oh, sorry." The waitress plucked the jug of milk and put it back on her tray. "Would you like a slice of lemon with your tea?" Lehman shook his head. "It's fine as it is, thank you." "Right, if there's anything else, give me a shout." "I will." Lehman maintained his smile until the waitress was back behind the counter. Then his expression turned to stone as he gazed out of the window. There they were, Riley and his new colleague, emerging from the nightclub. Lehman sipped his tea as he watched them stroll along the quay. When they were sufficiently far away, he took a last sip and got to his feet. The waitress was eyeing him from across the cafe, looking faintly alarmed. "Got to dash," Lehman called out to her. "Lovely tea. Shame I can't stay." He tossed a pound coin onto the table as a tip, then he marched for the door. Across the road, he passed the door to the Icebox nightclub without stopping. Then he turned into a narrow alley that ran alongside. The place had to have a back entrance, and he soon came to a tall wooden gate set into the wall. It was locked, and though he could reach the top, it had been festooned with barbed wire. Never mind. Looking for exits and entrances was never a waste of time. You never knew when you might need to beat a hasty retreat. Returning to the main entrance, he found the front door unlocked and slipped inside. It was dingy, the furniture draped in shadows, and that was excellent. Silently he went to the bar, listening to the activity coming from behind it. Glass bottles clinked and rattled, and a male voice sang softly, the inane lyrics belonging to some dreadful pop song or other. Lehman risked a peek. The young man squatted on his haunches, intent on his task, as he filled a shelf with bottled beers. Lehman considered joining the young man behind the bar, but it looked cramped back there, and he liked to have space to work. There was no alternative. The mountain must go to Mohammed. Lehman cleared his throat loudly, and the effect was immediate. "Bloody hell!" The young man spun around and stood up, his right fist clenched and ready. Good. This was going to be fun. "Who the hell are you?" the young man demanded. "You shouldn't be in here. Out!" Lehman offered him a gentle smile. The young man had a handsome face. What a pity. "I said out!" The young man leaned forward, pointing to the door. "Now, before I—" Lehman never found out what the young man was threatening to do. Reaching up with both hands, his movements too fast to follow, he grabbed the young man by the shoulders and pulled his head down hard, slamming his face into the bar. The cartilage in the young man's nose snapped with a satisfying crunch, and when Lehman lifted the poor fellow's head, he saw eyes dulled by pain and blood pouring from the man's nose and lips to streak his smooth skin. "Oh dear," Lehman said smoothly. "Now let's have no more shouting. Instead, we'll talk in a more civilized way, and then nothing like that needs to happen again. Okay?" The young man swallowed hard and tried to speak, but Lehman placed a finger across the man's bruised and bleeding lips. "Hush now." Lehman pulled a clean tissue from his pocket and offered it, but the young man simply stared at him, his eyes welling with tears. "Take it." Lehman waved the tissue in the air. "You need it, my friend." The young man took the tissue and held it over his lips, gasping in pain. "What's your name?" Lehman asked gently. Freddie, but please don't. Now, Lehman interrupted. You're going to be okay. I know it hurts, but you're young and fit. You'll be right as rain in no time, believe me. It looks worse than it is. What do you want? Freddie asked, his voice wavering. Lehman sighed, contented. There, we've come to the point already. Isn't that wonderful? Without waiting for a reply, he said, Those policemen, what do they want to know? Who are they looking for? Conflicting emotions clouded Freddie's expression, but fear won the day. Lehman could see it in the young man's eyes. He could smell it coming off him. It was almost beautiful. They asked about a girl, Freddie mumbled. Lindsay and a boyfriend. Lehman watched Freddie carefully. Sadly, the silly boy was holding something back. Lehman took a breath and let it out slowly. Then he placed his hands on the bar and leaned in, his eyes boring into Freddie's. There's something else, Freddie, something you're not telling me, and I find that very disappointing indeed. They asked about Mank, but I didn't tell them anything, I swear. Lehman raised an eyebrow. Mank? You don't know him? Lehman shook his head, and Freddie let out a shaky breath. I thought maybe you worked for him. Do I look like I work for the kind of lowlife who hangs around in a dump like this? It was Freddie's turn to shake his head. I don't associate with criminals or thugs or... Lehman looked thoughtful. What shall we call them? I know, ne'er-do-wells. He laughed quietly to himself. I'm a freelance contractor, Freddie. A specialist. One of my areas of expertise is the extraction of information. It can be a messy business, drawn out and painful, or it can go easily. I assume you'd prefer the latter, so you're going to tell me everything you know about this Mank person, including where to find him. Freddie ran his tongue over his blood-stained lips, and then he began to talk. 2 minutes later, Lehman put his hand in his pocket and pulled something out. Freddie flinched, but Lehman had only a black leather wallet in his hand. Tossing a few £10 notes onto the bar, he said, Freddie, go home, get yourself cleaned up, and then go out and buy yourself some new clothes. You need to smarten yourself up because you'll be looking for a new job. You don't work here anymore. But I can't just... You can, and you will, Lehman interrupted. Telephone whatever reptile runs this place and tell him you're done. Make an excuse if you like, but tell him you have no choice, which, incidentally, happens to be true. If I see you around here again, I will be displeased, and you don't want that. Lehman stepped back and looked around the room. You don't want to be stuck in here, Freddie. At best, it's what I can only describe as a shithole. Move on. Focusing his cold gaze on Freddie once again, he added, Do you understand? Yes, I don't even like it here. With trembling fingers, he picked up the money from the bar. What do you say? Lehman intoned. Thanks. Good lad. Manners cost nothing. Lehman sent the lad an avuncular smile, and then he walked out and kept moving, heading back to his car. The fresh air awakened his appetite, and he considered his option for lunch. He could afford the time. Dennis Mankiewicz would not be hard to find. As that was very short, we will press on into chapter 3. See if we can get through it before I succumb to the humid the heat in here. Chapter 13. Back at Heavy Tree Police Station, Spiller and Riley pulled up their chairs and gathered around the desk of Detective Superintendent John Chisholm. Dennis Mankiewicz, Chisholm murmured. I wondered when that little tossbook would surface again. Riley sent Spiller an I told you so look. To Chisholm, he said, There wasn't much on the PNC, a couple of arrests for GBH and 3 for common assault, but nothing stuck. He's never seen the inside of a courtroom. Don't I know it, Chisholm muttered. I had him for GBH a couple of years back. It was a sure thing. but the victim was a young doctor. The poor sod was on a night out with a few mates from the hospital when he saw some bloke taking a beating. The doctor stepped in and tried to help the guy on the ground. Mank was the one doing the kicking, and he did not appreciate someone trying to spoil his fun. In front of half a dozen witnesses, he turned on the doctor and beat the hell out of him, then he walked away. Bastard, Riley said. How come he didn't get sent down? I thought we had him, Chisholm replied. You couldn't ask for better witnesses than doctors and nurses. But Mank had an even bigger crowd who swore blind he'd been at a darts match on the other side of the river. We'd have taken it to court, but one by one our best witnesses changed their stories. It was dark, they said, so they couldn't be sure who they'd seen. Somebody had got to them, and that was the end of it. His tail over, Chisholm grimaced. Is he part of a gang? Riley asked. Worse, he's part of a family. The Mankovich clan are from the arse end of Eastern Europe. Christ knows where, but they've made themselves very cosy around here. We've had a dozen of them through the custody suite, and we've managed to send one or two down, but it's never easy with that lot. Spiller frowned at the tone of Chisholm's condemnation, and it didn't go unnoticed. Don't look at me like that, Chisholm said. I've got nothing against people who come to this country legally. Good, hard-working people, most of them. But there are bad people all over the world, and if some of them come over here, I, for one, am not going to roll out the red carpet. A criminal is a criminal, no matter where they're from, and I treat them all the same. Got it? Spiller had the sense to stay quiet, but he nodded in what he hoped was a contrite manner. What happened to the doctor? Riley asked. Oh, he was okay in the end. He had a concussion and a couple of broken ribs. He needed a few stitches, but he made a full recovery. I think he moved away to Norfolk. You can't blame him. There was an address for Mank on the computer, but it was from a couple of years ago, Spiller said. What are the chances he's still there? Buddle Lane, Chisholm replied. Oh, this slightly changed from the episode. So I've got to try and remember. Sorry, from a previous edition of the book. Because I made I got the name wrong. So I put Buddy Lane, and it wasn't. It was Buddle Lane. A reader kindly told me. What's it say? It sounds quaint, but it's anything but. You couldn't make it up, Riley said. To spill it, he added. It's in St. Thomas, a residential area. Lots of semi-detached houses and not much else. A nicely anonymous kind of place. Chisholm folded his hands in his lap. You could take a trip over there, but I doubt he'll be at the same address. From what I recall, he was renting the house from an uncle, so he might well have moved on. But before we go knocking on any more doors, what's the bigger picture? What are we looking at, Paddy? At this stage, I'm not too sure, Riley replied. We're no nearer to finding out what happened at Lindsay's flat. The uniforms have been door to door, but they haven't found anything very much. A couple of neighbours thought they might have heard a vehicle door being slammed shut, but nobody bothered to look outside, so we've got no eyewitnesses. I don't like it, Chisholm said. Ollie drew a blank with the hospitals. And I've had him tracing Lindsay's financials, but it's not good news. Her last cash withdrawal was early Saturday evening, and there's been nothing since. So she hasn't used her cards or taken out any cash. How much did she take out on Saturday? Spiller asked. Chisholm pointed at him. Good question, Tim. But it was only 25 quid. Enough for a night out, a bag of chips and a taxi home, but not enough to live on. Not for long, at any rate. By the end of the night, she wouldn't have had enough for a train ticket. Unless she prepared everything in advance, Riley suggested. But then why would she go out with her friends if she was planning on running away? It could have been a smoke screen or one last fling, Spiller said. A way of saying goodbye to her old life before she headed off on a new one. Chisholm shook his head. This isn't play for today, Tim. People aren't half so dramatic as they make out on the telly. If Lindsay wanted to take off, there was nothing stopping her. She has resources. She has a family with money. She'd have done it properly. She wouldn't have stranded herself at Exeter St. David's in the dead of night, shivering on the platform with no money and no bags, waiting hours for the next train. Chisholm paused. Assume the worst. We're looking at murder or kidnapping, possibly with a sexual motive. I'm with you there, Gov, Riley said, 100%. Chisholm looked at Spiller. You've seen her flat. What do you think, Tim? I agree. Chisholm waited for a moment as if expecting more, but when nothing was forthcoming, he seemed secretly pleased. Right, lads, here's a few questions for you. If someone's taken her, where did they do it? If it was at her flat, why didn't the girl downstairs hear anything? The sound of a vehicle door slamming doesn't amount to much. That could have been anybody. If she was taken in the street nearby, why did none of the neighbours notice? I don't know, Gov, Riley admitted. We haven't found out who lives on the ground floor yet, Spiller said. I can look into that, Gov. Mr. Clifford ought to have the resident's contact details. Didn't you get those when you spoke to Francis? Chisholm asked. Riley tilted his head, abashed. Sorry, Gov, I didn't think of it at the time, but we'll chase it up. Good, but that's not like you, Paddy. You normally dot every I and cross every T. I slipped up. I won't make excuses, but at that stage, we were looking at a bog-standard MISPA. Things have changed. Chisholm nodded. You said her flat might have been searched. Have forensics come up with anything? Not as far as I know, Riley replied. There's a lot for them to go through, but it's about time they got their asses in gear. I'll see what I can do, Chisholm said. At least we have Mankovic's prints on file. I'll tell them to be on the lookout. He paused. Let's keep our powder dry as far as Mankey's concerned. Don't go to his address yet. Let's see what kind of case we can build. Show Mankovic's photo to Carter and see if he'll confirm that Mank hit him. Make sure you get Carter's statement on the record. But first, talk to Francis Clifford's wife. You said Francis was vague about his daughter's friends. Her mum might have more of an idea. Yeah, he said as much, Riley replied. Mothers and daughters can be close. Maybe, although I met Diana Clifford at a charity do, and I happen to know she's not Lindsay's mum, Chisholm said. She's Francis Clifford's second wife and quite a bit younger than him. How much younger? Spiller asked. A gentleman doesn't inquire, Chisholm replied. Regardless of her age, she's sharp as they come, so she might be able to give you some insight into Lindsay's state of mind. Paddy, you know the drill. Was Lindsay unhappy about anything? Had anybody been bothering her? Was she okay for money? Did she have problems at work? Spiller surreptitiously took out his notebook and began making notes. Seeing the others watching him, he said, I don't want to miss anything. There's nothing wrong with my memory, but this is my first proper case. I want to do it right. Chisholm seemed to think this was entertaining, so Spiller kept his head down, scribbling away at top speed. Get the names of Lindsay's friends, as many as you can, Chisholm went on. Trace them, talk to them, find out what they saw. If there's a history of arguments between Lindsay and Tony Carter, we need to know about it. Did he ever lose control? Did he throw crockery? Did he get a bit handy with his fists? We need chapter and verse. Looking up from his notes, Spiller said, Is Carter our prime suspect? Chisholm shook his head. You're jumping the gun, Tim. If Lindsay turns up dead, we'll set up a team and go all out to catch a killer. If that happens, your role will change, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. To Riley, he said, Is there anything you need, or are you all set? I'm good to go, Riley replied. I'll visit Mrs. Clifford right away. He hesitated. I'm happy for Tim to tag along. From what her husband said, Mrs. Clifford is in a bit of a state, and Tim has a nice touch with the ladies. Spiller blinked in surprise. Have I? Yeah, you were good with Carol Whittaker, Riley said with a grin. You calmed her down. It's what comes of being a happily married man. You could give lessons. Most of us are between wives at the moment. Cheeky sod, Chisholm muttered. I've been married for years. How many years exactly? Riley asked. Chisholm pulled a face. How the hell should I know? When my good lady wife tells me it's our anniversary, I believe her. We go to the Burney Inn, we have prawn cocktail, a nice T-bone steak, and Black Forest gatto. Throw in a bottle of plonk, and all is well with the world. Riley mimed applause. Here he is, folks, the last of the great romantics. Oh, bugger off, you two, Chisholm said. Go and do your jobs, and leave me to do mine. He plucked a sheet of paper from his tray and began reading. Riley and Spiller stood, but as they wheeled their chairs back into place, Chisholm added, What's your step with Diana Clifford? There was something in his tone that made Riley and Spiller stop and turn to look back at Chisholm. She's very glam, is Diana, Chisholm went on, the sheet of paper in his hands apparently forgotten. But make no mistake, she's nobody's fool, and like a husband, she has friends in high places. Put a foot wrong, and we'll all be getting hold over the coals. I do not relish that prospect, not one bit." "We'll be careful," Riley said. "You better had be," Chisholm replied, and it seemed to Spiller that Chisholm's cold gaze had settled on him. Unsure how to respond, Spiller contented himself with a nod of acknowledgement. Then he put the chair back where it belonged and fell in behind Riley as he made for the door. End of that chapter. Yes, sorry about the slight glitch of reading from the from an earlier book with an earlier cover, but yeah, it's funny how people with expert knowledge and a local person that said, "Oh, you've got the name of that street wrong," and I just literally read it incorrectly from the map, and so I had to change a little sentence around it, which is a shame because I thought a criminal living in somewhere called Buddy Lane, which sounds friendly, would have been nice, but it wasn't. It was Bottle Lane. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully, all being well, maybe it'll be cooler next week, and I will get back to Thriller Fiction Thursday, next Thursday. If you've been enjoying this, thank you so much for listening along. If you want to read along, you can look for the book, ebook, paperback, so on at your local library or on Amazon. And yes, subscribing is wonderful. Commenting and liking is all great. YouTube is a good place to comment, and on the site at michaelcampling.com, which is hosted on Substack, so you can follow there. You can subscribe to each section individually on michaelcampling.com, which means if you want all 4 readings a week, you can subscribe to everything, or you can switch some of them off, and so you just get an email for the ones you want. Otherwise, I hope you're taking care. I hope you're not too hot. Maybe if you're in somewhere with a heat wave, perhaps you've got aircon. It's not such a common thing in this country, sadly, and I think they're all sold out. But yeah, lovely to be reading to you again. Take care, happy reading, and look after yourselves. Bye.